twice. We sent you over the sent form, Chad. Are you okay with us thus interviewing you about your experiences at One Stone and recording it?
Absolutely.
All right, and we'll be using it just for the purposes of what schools can be and of course for the next book. So
Great.
awesome.
Okay, great. So welcome everyone. So tonight we have Chad Carlson joining us from Boise, Idaho, and we're going to unpack student voice and ownership at One Stone in our Deeper Learning Details. This is Deeper Learning Details dive number 3. So we're trying to bring you some great stories tonight. I'm excited. This might be one of our favorite stories. So as we do that, I want to pop open and share a little bit of student voice to get us started. And I know this is a little bit out of step for our details series, but I'd like to actually start with a video tonight. And I'll try to share from my screen, but if that doesn't wind up working, I put the link over to the documentary page over in the chat. So if it doesn't work well from my device, then we'll switch and let everyone run from their own. Okay, thumbs up. Let's give it a try. All right. So let me share out to screen number 3. And we got folks still joining the room at the same time. So, okay, here is Rise.
I solemnly swear to disrupt for good. I solemnly swear to disrupt for good. No hands, it can't fall. You're gonna get it all the way down into your mouth.
So far, we haven't had any problems with it, at least that we know of.
I don't really know how we're going to top making a school. That's kind of where I'm at.
If you're creating something for kids, to benefit kids, to help them, to make them grow, why do kids not get a say in it? Why don't school boards have students on them?
I don't think it's any wonder that younger people don't vote now, because they've grown up learning that their voice doesn't matter, or that what they say can't really change anything.
One of the most valuable aspects of learning is asking questions and learning what you want to learn about, because if you're just being talked at, you're not going to go into the real world knowing what you want to change, and I think that's frightening.
I don't think a time is coming soon where it's like, oh, there are too many creative people.
I don't think we're interested in what has been. I think we're interested in what could be moving forward.
How do we shift towards that system of having the youth fixing the systems that are already in place?
Disrupting for good is challenging convention to try to make the world a better place.
Okay, that work okay, hopefully. All right, awesome. So that was just a bit of a documentary of which there must be more that we'll work with Chad to try to figure out like how distribution and that kind of stuff works. And if there is some kind of small fee or something like that, Chad, I think we'd be open to working with you as we try to really dive deep. And it's awesome that someone else really wanted to spend some time to dive deep on the questions around student voice and ownership also. But we wanted to start with that tonight to give both a voice to students as well as a little bit of an insight into the school, the building. You can sort of see some of the cultural aspects that they have going on there. Okay. Yeah, jump in, Chad. Go ahead. I mean,
yeah, no, I mean, I'm really excited to share about One Stone, and the creation of the lab school itself. Just a little bit about One Stone for those of you that don't know. One Stone is a student-led and directed nonprofit. So it's not just a school. The nonprofit actually runs 3 other programs, including the school, that are after school programs that are open to Treasure Valley students, the Boise area. And so we get a number of students that are coming from local public schools as well in the after school time of day, working on experiential service, working on a student-led design studio that we have, and also a student-led business incubator we call Hatch. And so it's really kind of a complex organization. And, Justin, as you mentioned at the start, it is governed by students. And so we have 2/3 or more of our governing board are students, which makes a very, very powerful dynamic for student voice.
For sure. So one of the moments we wanted to dive into a little bit more is that founding. And as Chad said, like every time I check back on the website, there's like 4 new projects launched. And so you all are just cranking out new ideas. And so even in and of itself, right, that's speaking to like, it really is an idea factory where kids are developing and running with ideas. But it did start as an after school program. And then there is this moment that I really want to explore with you a little bit, because there's a lot of adults in the room. There's this moment where you have this after school program and the kids are not wanting to go back to the traditional high school format, right? And they're probably talking with you and like, can we just stay here all day? And then you hold like a 24-hour design session. And at the end of that, the kids conclude, we have to start a school. Can you take us into that moment? And what I'm particularly curious about is for you, Chad, and whatever other adults were floating around that space at that moment, like how does this decision among students to, we need to start a school, like how does that land?
Well, I think first of all, it sounded like a terrible idea. I wasn't actually with One Stone at the time. I've been working with Teresa Poppin since 2004, doing various different things as a teacher and as a school leader at a different school. This was about 2014 or 15, where students really started getting interested in like, well, what could school look like if if we did the things that we do in the after school, if we did that as school. And like I said, the first reaction was like, terrible idea. That's just going to ruin the whole thing. You're going to have to throw grades on it. You're going to have, kids are here. It's kind of compulsory. You have to have attendance. The whole deal that comes with school wasn't part of this after school experience. Kids were coming on their own volition. They were doing projects they were interested in and had true full ownership over the whole process. So as soon as you make a school and you tell students they have to be there Monday through Friday from a certain time to whatnot, we just thought, well, that's just gonna, that can't work. But we really, obviously, like the team that was running the after school, running Project Good at the time, really listened. And there were actually 2 24-hour think challenges. And what came out of those sessions is, as complex as they were and as many great ideas as there were as far as reimagining education, there were really 2 insights. That was that one, school today in most traditional contexts aren't relevant for our students. And so relevant as in it's not addressing the things that students are interested in pursuing or learning about, but also relevant, not preparing them for the world after high school. And so the second theme was schools lacked passion. There was no kind of time in the day where students can actually go out and pursue things they're passionate about or interested in or curious about. If you ask students what they want to study or explore, no one's going to be like English language arts or really could use some world studies. Students have all sorts of interests and curiosities, and so we kind of went with these 2 themes of relevance and passion to design a school. And we worked with students to really decide what is this going to look like. And so that moment of should we do this thing was really when we came to that conclusion of yes, we knew it had to be relevant and it had to be passion driven. And that kind of brought us to where we were at. And we weren't talking a lot about agency and things like that. We just were talking about how can we make learning what it needs to be for students today. address the things that they want to learn and the things that they need to learn.
Thanks for that, Chad. So for our listeners who haven't been at your school yet, which is awesome. So every time we tell the tale of One Stone, folks' eyes just get big and just so full of wonder. They really want to know more. So can you talk to us a little bit about what does this agency look like and feel like at One Stone?
Yeah, well, gosh, that's a many layered question. I think, I'm just going to take myself back to a personal story of Jason, when you came and visited. And I remember we were standing in one of the pods and you just were like, what is everybody doing right now? And you started pointing around at different kids doing different things. I'm like, I don't know, go ask them. I'm not really sure what is happening. There were pods and groups of students. There were students doing, individual projects. There were coach-led endeavors in the kitchen. And I'm just like, let's go talk to the kids. Let's see what everybody's doing. And I think, probably lost count of all the different things that they were doing. And so agency at One Stone, again, this is a multi-tiered question. I mean, first of all, yeah, we have students on the board. They are part of the governing board, and so they have a very strong voice in the decision-making and the strategic plan and direction of the organization itself. But also just getting down into to the student level, students are a big part of deciding what they're going to learn, how they're going to learn, how they're going to show their learning and growth. They're a big part of assessment. And so students at the lab school are developing their own personal portfolios that have, evidence of learning and evidence of growth with a lot of just really amazing in-depth reflections. And so students are a big part of the assessment process. They're also, obviously a big part of this passion part and, passion and purpose, and really trying to figure out who they are and what they're all about. And so this idea of identity and trying to connect with figuring out who they are and where they want to go in life really directs their learning. And so, you see agency from, helping design the schedule. Students are a big part of that. The schedule that we're running right now was designed by a student with students. Obviously, coaches gave feedback and input, and the student did a lot of investigation into like, well, what types of things do we need in the schedule? Obviously, they needed lunch. That was the first thing she started with. But then just looking like, well, we've got design lab, which works with design thinking. We've got experiential projects going on. And she just met with a bunch of different students and coaches and school leaders and designed this amazing schedule that the kids love now. And so really giving them the power to design the school from the day-to-day to the personal is really important. And, not all students come to One Stone ready to take this on. And so it's also, we take a very scaffolded approach. We're very aware that a lot of students are coming from more, contrived or teacher-centric contexts. And so that takes a little bit of learning and a little bit of unpacking. There's a lot of relationship building, trust building, moments of vulnerability. So also just working with students at that level to give them the sense that, yeah, you are empowered and it's okay to go out and do things. And also, again, it's okay to fail. I think you can scare the agency out of somebody if they're scared to fail. And so creating a culture that is safe and brave for risk takers is really what we're up to. And it, again, it's not clean and orderly. It can be really complicated and messy.
Awesome. What I really like about One Stone is you really hit on, Michael Fullen was in an interview with Jalmeda on Free Range Humans. He said it's not necessarily about agency and voice, it's about enactment. And that's what I love about your all school, is it's about the kids actually enacting these changes.
Yeah.
So what happens at One Stone when what kids want to do goes against what the teachers might want to do?
Well, I mean, we typically do what the kids want to do. I mean, it depends, it just depends on what we're talking about here. And I'll give you a great example. Early on in our development of the school, we needed a schedule. We had gone into winter, our January term is is all deep dives. And so it's like you'll have a week-long course in winter exploration and outdoor survival and navigation, and come back and students will jump into music composition or whatever it is they want to do. January is just this deep dive. Doesn't really count. There's not a whole lot of scheduling around it, but come back in February and we need a schedule. And we had gotten so busy in the January term and the deep dives and the explorations that we hadn't built a schedule. And so, a couple of coaches that was kind of nerve-wracking to go into a Monday without a schedule for, Monday, February 1st to whatever, the end of May. And so, like adults do, a couple of schedules were designed, but we checked with the students, and I'll tell you, you could hear a pin drop, and it was like, nobody likes the schedule. And the kids are like, why are you all designing this thing? And we're like, well, because we needed to get things going, right? And we have this sense of like, it's such a rush and so important to do. And, the kids really just called us out. They were like, well, hold on a minute. Like, we need to design the schedule. We need to make this thing what we want it to look like. And obviously we're going to collaborate and work with you, but don't be designing something at home and coming and showing and presenting us and giving us a couple of choices. And so agency isn't just these pre-contrived, pre-designed choices that you give students. It really comes to students designing, students building and designing and making something work. So we've had moments where I wouldn't say, well, I'm sure it's tension, but it's part of working it out. It's part of that, negotiation and collaboration. And I think we're getting better at it, both the students and the coaches, kind of just understanding that, again, things are going to happen, things get messy, and how these processes work.
So that's outstanding. I had pre-built a question that was around that tension. And I actually pre-built the question like, can you give us an example, like the school schedule? Because that is one of those things where rubber is going to meet the road. And so the fact that the students pushed back and said, no, even the school schedule, we're going to own time also.
Yeah.
So I think that speaks to just how far this goes. So
yeah, we've had other moments where, we do have, kind of expectations of a student experience at One Stone. We want them to take, or do projects in the sciences and mathematics and in the world of critical reading and writing. And, so they are fulfilling these disciplinary kind of obligations that students in this country need to fulfill in order to go on to higher ed and post-secondary. And, we've had tensions around that. Like, why can't I just do art? And so it's all about navigating and working with the student and helping them understand the purpose and the why behind what we're doing. And understanding that too, that like, hey, you might not want to do this particular discipline, but you get to help us design it, and we can explore it through the lens of your curiosity and interest. It's just a lot of students have never done that before. And now that we have more and more students who have done it, they can share that journey. And it's really kind of a shared journey, and it helps other students kind of aspire and see what that can look like.
So I was listening into, there is a lot of onboarding that must be happening. And one of the areas of onboarding I was specifically interested in is onboarding to governance, right? So it's one thing to take a kid brand new to the building and sort of onboard them to the culture and owning their own learning. But then there's another stage of onboarding, which is, okay, now you're ready for ownership of this, and like functioning as a school board is its own, like, I mean, there's a ton of school board training for adults out there. And so speak to us a little bit about sort of how students are prepared for these sort of governance tasks that even adults need a lot of preparation for usually.
Yeah, well, the One Stone board is a very, very organized, powerful board. It's very interesting. I'm not on the board. I do attend board meetings every now and then when I, present updates or kind of just report on initiatives that we're working on at the school level. But the onboarding process, really, I think it's in August. They put together a board retreat. And we kind of cycle through new students, because obviously students graduate and move on, and we'll bring in new students. And so we're never at the point where we're onboarding an entirely new board. We do have moments where it's like, hey, there were more students onboarded this year than last. We always have a critical mass of experienced board students. But we really take it seriously, and the onboarding, the retreat that happens in August is both organizational, and it's also cultural. And so it's very much like getting students on board, understanding like what it is that a board of a nonprofit does and what it is that a board of a nonprofit doesn't do. I mean, they're not getting involved in day-to-day operations. That's the leadership of the school. They're looking at the organization of One Stone, which is 4 programs: the Lab School, Hatch, Two Birds, and Project Good, and making sure that organization is well governed and sustainable. And so, and they do a lot of committee work. And so the students will really become experts in their committee, whether that's I think it's governance and planning to strategy. And then the other one is the finance committee. And so students, become really kind of experts in their field and report on that. So the onboarding itself is just kind of like I think you would see in any other board. It's very professional, it's very organized, and it's a lot better than any board that I've ever been on as far as a nonprofit goes.
So I had a question around bylaws, and Susanna had a similar question in the chat around Robert's Rules of Order. Like, how much of that sort of traditional structure is being used in this space, or is this a pretty non-traditional board? Also? Oh,
it's very, very traditional. I mean, we have bylaws. We are following the rules and regulations of a nonprofit organization. We complete an annual audit, have auditors come in, and students are working in the finance committee to help with that. They are making big decisions. And we have our chair of the board is a student, always is this year. The one that we have, she's getting a lot of coaching by both the adults and the students on the board. But it is a very well structured, traditional board in that sense, as far as following kind of rules of a board and having rules of governance.
Okay, awesome. We'll come back around. We got a great question around like, how does this transition into college? We'll come back to that because I know there is some great stuff there, growth transcript. Hopefully we have time for all that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So another question, like, do students help determine the committees that are needed? Like, what are the current pressing problems in the building that need addressing that we might need a committee structure or a task force around?
Oh yeah, students definitely. And again, like I'm not part of the board, so I can't speak in great detail, but absolutely students, obviously students are on the ground and they know what's going on as far as like kind of the pulse of the culture and the vibe of the school and the students and what have you. So they bring things up all the time. Sometimes they aren't, governance related issues, and they'll talk through that. They're like, well, hold on a minute. This is more of a leadership issue that deals more with school operations, or yeah, this is absolutely a governance issue. And so they're learning about that as well. And so, students will create subcommittees as needed. It just depends on the needs and where things are at with the school itself or the organization, sorry.
So Justin was going really deep into how this is different for students. How is this different for parents to accept this kind of school or to get on board and be okay with this?
Yeah,
sort of dovetails into Jennifer's question about college preparation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, parents are obviously, I'm a parent. I come from a more traditional background of learning and education. And so sometimes it's hard to imagine something that you've never experienced. But, our parents are also kind of a monolithic group. We have various parents who 100%, they're like, I've never seen my kid coming home so happy and excited to talk about what they're doing. And we have other parents who are just like, how do we get online and check how they're doing in their courses and their immersions and their experiences? Like, I need to know. And so, we have various different needs. We do a lot of parent nights and bringing parents in. The students do a lot of presentations, where they are doing portfolio reviews, presenting on their growth and their learning. We also do presentations where students are presenting their projects to the community. So there are a lot of moments for parents to come in and see the students in action. We also, lean on our parents as far as helping us, connect with internships and job shadows and passion projects. All parents have something they can contribute. And so some get involved that way. But as far as just, what is it like for parents? It's a total mind shift. It's a paradigm shift for, I would say, all parents. Some are like, again, more excited and eager for it. And others are more like, I don't know, my kid wanted to do this, so I'm going to support them. We just kind of meet them where they're at. And we obviously have, like I said, these parent nights and things that are made for the larger group, but we'll also meet with families one-on-one or whatever as they go along. I guess for the parent skeptics, it usually takes a little bit of time for them to really start seeing like, wow, this is totally different. It looks totally different, but look at my student, look at my kid talking about the things they're doing and talking about how they're learning. They are at a totally different level than when they were at public school or even a different private school just the year or two before. And so parents see it, and it's actualized in how the students kind of hold themselves and the things that they're doing. So it's pretty cool. Oftentimes we let the student growth speak for itself.
So Chad, when you're jumping into this depth of student enactment, we'll call it, I sort of like that word. How do you get around things, or how do you address things like accreditation, which you all just had a visit? How did that go?
As far as what? I guess I don't like.
Well, it's like a more traditional idea of accreditation. So when you had this accrediting body come in, were they challenged with how you were doing things as far as like, wait, how does this grading work? Wait, how does scheduling work? Wait, how does this work?
Oh no, the accrediting team. So we're working on accreditation. We're currently a candidate school, which is the kind of stage right below full accreditation. The accrediting team loves the student-led model. We're also tuition free. They love the tuition free model and they want to learn from us. And so, this is a movement nationwide. And so, and we're working on accreditation with independent schools. And so obviously there is it's not as traditional as maybe say public school or as rigid. So no, actually there's a lot of interest in meeting with the students and hearing their perspective, and kind of like you all, like we want to learn more, like how does this work and how does that work? And they're coming in as a learning team as well. And so, and we've felt nothing but supported by the NWAIS, who is the accrediting body that we'll be working with, that they love what we're doing and they want to support us and figure out how to, accredit a student board, a school run by a student board and a school with a tuition-free model. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
So Chad, your own personal background is in a variety of schools, and you have served in a director role and independent schools. And so you had a lot of school background and probably some degree of baggage. I was listening to a different podcast where like you got to start with a great PBL school. So projects have been part of the journey the whole way. But I'm curious as to the leadership in the early days. Like, what were the mental models you were relying on? Was like, from a leadership standpoint, was it purely just hang on? I have no idea what's going to happen. Just hang on.
Oh, there's always just the hang on. The hang on is very clear and present. But no, I think like for me as a leader, coming into a situation in which we didn't declare a formal leader, and so we were really taking this as kind of a flat leadership model, and it was really kind of like roll up your sleeves and let's get doing what we need to get doing. But with that being said, I think all people have the capacity to be leaders, and I just kind of leaned on the experience that I've had as a leader, and then also people that I consider a mentor and I look up to, and really kind of look at like both transformational and democratic leadership models. And really believe strongly in the sense of trust. I'm not a micromanager. And so, bringing the kids in and understanding, I think like the number one thing that we got from our executive director was it's okay to take risks. And so like, as much as we were telling that to the students, we felt that as kind of the founding coaches of the school, working with the students, like, let's try this stuff, you know, and we've really been kind of empowered to go out there and do things differently. And so that, as far as leadership goes, that's the hard part, because I think a lot of people come into the situation, particularly in education, with a very fixed mindset. And, you know, they want to succeed. They're not really in the practice zone. They're in the performance zone. And, you know, to help other adults kind of be at ease with letting go, and trusting, and really focusing on process. Process is so important. It's really, and I tell this to the students all the time, and to the coaches, it's not really what you do that's magical. It's how you do it. And, you know, that how is what we call the secret sauce at One Stone. Like, really, you know, leading with our values up front, and really making sure that we're, you know, I guess just, you know, walking our talk, and value driven. And so I would say, like, just to answer your question, I think, like, my past experience in more, even though they were innovative schools or great schools, my past experience in more kind of, you know, college prep schools and what have you. Yeah, there's a lot of baggage to unpack. There's a lot of performance, a lot of expectation, and, you know, our definition of success had to be totally rethought. So it's an ongoing process.
So in this ongoing process, were there ideas or approaches that you just had to scratch that, from a leadership perspective, like, this just isn't going to work?
Well, you know, I think for me, yeah, and I don't know if I can put my finger directly on it. I think, like, at first starting, like, meeting Teresa, I kept asking, like, well, so, like, what's the idea? I don't understand. Like, what's your vision? And you know, I get that students drive, but what does that look like? How does that happen? I didn't really truly understand that. And so that was really hard to try and figure out, like, what does this look like? And, you know, for me, like, just kind of abandoning my concept of what success looks like, and trying to redefine success. And that's really, like, slowing down, getting to know the kids, like, you know, growth when you see it, and celebrate that growth, was really important for me. And so, you know, going into this endeavor, I think it was just kind of hard, because I am kind of a perfectionist. And so it was really hard not to be like, we need to do all of these things, and kind of put that off to the side and say, hey, there's a lot of things that we need to pay attention to. But where are we going, everybody? And so, you know, I don't know if that answers your question, Jason, but definitely a lot of pieces of my past that I think I had to identify and recognize and put off to the side for, you know, a different time.
So I think I might take a pretty big transition, if that's okay. I want to I'm going to share screen for just a second to just give folks sort of some middle ground, because here in this interview, we don't have time to unpack everything that is going on. And so popping over here is the One Stone site, and you can sort of scroll through it. Where I want to just bring your attention to for just a second is around the blob. So as you scroll down, there's just tons of stuff going on around here. So super personalized, but you can see some of the stuff that's happening, like this living in beta, which feels a little bit like an advisory model. Students are developing portfolios. Oh, there is advisors. So you might catch me on getting that wrong. But the thing I want to bring you to for a minute is the blob, which is, these are the 32, and I think we're still at 32, right, Chad?
Yep, we are at 32.
Correct. So these are sort of the critical, they're bold learning objectives, blob, right? That's where I came from. And so it is to these things that students are working and are ultimately assessed, and then a growth transcript is produced back to each of these things. In fact, it's in graphical format, so a pretty impressive document in its own way. But just to try to fill in some of the middle ground of, like, what does that learner experience look like? It's highly project-based, sort of demonstrating mastery or at least proficiency in all of these different sort of bold learning objectives, leading to portfolios and assessment, and ultimately sort of that growth transcript story that gets told to the college. So I filled in a bunch of gaps there because I want to get back around to student agency and like what's the result of all this student agency. But anything I got wrong in sort of filling in some actual implementation part of the.
No, I mean, that's right. I mean, we identified the 32 learning objectives. We worked with students that the crazy ones were like, maybe this should be a school. They didn't actually attend the school because by the time we landed funding and developed the concept, those students had mostly graduated. But we worked with students to design a school for students. And those 32 learning objectives really are the learning objectives that students felt that they needed to make learning relevant now and to walk away with a toolkit that they could use in their lives outside of high school that would be relevant for them in, landing a job, succeeding in college, or whatever the next step after high school is. And so the blob for us is really important as far as, kind of instilling that sense of relevancy. And also the growth transcript assesses student work over time and really looking at 3 areas. The complexity in which students are able to apply those 32 learning objectives, the context in which they're applying those learning objectives, and the frequency in which they're applying those learning objectives in various contexts. And so we talk about context being what, was it coach designed, co-collaborated, or student designed? Is it something that's taking place in the school? Is it taking place in a professional context, in an internship or job shadow, or out in the community doing an experiential service project? Just various aspects like that, that really allow students to see like, hey, my growth is going to, continue on this trajectory if I start taking my learning outside of this building, if I start finding ways in which I can design and I can create or collaborate or co-create, really looking at, you're not just sitting there and we're delivering these things. You actually have to be active, actively engaged in the experience. But you didn't miss anything. Living in Beta isn't an advisory model. You could throw it in advisory, but really living in Beta, and I'm just going to throw a plug in there because we do living in Beta work. We're actually scaling the model, and we're actually doing professional development around living in Beta. During COVID, of all times, we piloted living in Beta, the program itself, with 9 different organizations, schools to youth organizations, et cetera. And our big takeaway was the Living in Beta program's awesome, but really in order to do it well, teachers, adults, they need mentorship training. And so we're currently doing some PD on mentorship training. And we're doing round 1 right now that started early October, ends the 19th of November. And we're going to do round 2 probably starting in early February. So if anybody's out there interested in doing some of this training, it's pretty cool stuff. And level 1's all about how to empower student-driven learning. But the whole thing around living in Beta was how do we get students to drive their learning? And so we created this program not with the idea of we need to create an advisory model. It was, a number of wayfinding activities that kind of culminated into a living in Beta experience that helps students own their learning, figure out their purpose, and figure out who they are.
So, okay. Right. There's a lot, and even you're being super competency based. And so if you really want to see a strong competency school in action, like this is those 32 criteria and then performance assessment to them, that's a competency model. So that's a different, some other night. I want to talk just briefly. We have a few minutes before we turn to audience questions. A lot of questions coming in the chat. So if we don't capture it fully, then you might get more. What is the impact you're starting to see of all this student voice and ownership and empowerment as these stories sort of move forward? What are some of the things you're seeing as the stories move forward, the result of all this?
The impact that I have seen just anecdotally is students having a lot more purpose around the decisions they're making, for their trajectory after high school. And so we still have a number of our kids who go to college. You're like, well, how have you transformed learning? They're still doing the same thing. And again, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And I feel like our students are a lot more purposeful in their next steps. The choices that they're making are a lot more purposeful, which is, which is awesome because you follow up with them later on, and it's not like, you know, how you doing? It's more kind of like, hey, how's the medical sciences working out? You know, what types of things have you been doing? And you've got these real connection points with students that I just love. I feel like a lot of the high school students I've worked with in the past are going off to college to go figure out what the heck they want to do. And a big part of what we, you know, this idea of living in beta is that, you know, we never are static. We are truly evolving, continually, you know, dynamic people changing. And so, yeah, some of our students change their, you know, their idea or sense of selves in college, but as they leave, they're much more purposeful in their decisions. And that's been wonderful to see. Another really cool piece of data that a colleague of mine came up with, she's working with alumni, and she found that 68% of the students who are graduating from One Stone, leaving One Stone, continue to engage in experiential service in their lives outside of high school. And so whether that's in college or professionally. So again, we've been around since 2008 as an after school model, but 68% of our students have kind of come through the One Stone world, continue to give back. And I think that's just such a powerful testament to this idea. I mean, a big part, we haven't touched it, a big part of One Stone is this idea of doing good, of giving back. And we've got this idea of doing good for good, that idea like you're doing it for a good reason, but also this idea that it's long lasting and sustainable good. And so anyway, that just really kind of made me feel good to hear about our students continuing to find ways to give back through service.
All right, Jason, you want to ask our last question, and audience members get ready. We're about to turn it to you.
Yeah, you bet. So Chad, for schools out there that may be a little bit more traditional than you, what advice would you give them if they want to start going down this path of more voice, more autonomy, kick out the school board and put on kids? What's the happy medium? Like where can we have more concerted, not baby steps, but more effort in more of a traditional settings, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm just gonna yeah, I mean, I think One Stone is a really easy model to be like, look at how they're doing, everything's so great. And I totally get there are a lot of constraints in a lot of different places, even very innovative, open learning contexts. But the very first thing that I think, like, and this is just who I am, I think developing relationships with your students is number one. How many students go through the doors of school all day and, you know, never get to know the adults? And there's so much research out there talking about the importance and the power of adult-student relationships. Our students need those. They need to connect with adults. They need to connect with their community. They need to feel heard and seen, and they need to feel validated and important, and to really just slow down and develop those relationships. As far as just, you know, the little steps of empowering student agency in the classroom, you know, ask students, find ways to, you know, to get student interest involved in the things you're doing. And so I think just asking students what they're interested in, and you taking the time to make those connections between whatever it is you're doing and the students' interests, and knowing that, you know, who your students are. To me, that's really where it starts. I mean, these kids are human beings. They're in a lot of ways treated like a product. And, you know, we need to move away from that. We need to make the kids feel like humans. We want to humanize learning. We want them to love learning. And they're going to get that from us. We are the role models. So when we're going through and just kind of running through our curriculum and doing things quickly because we have to, and all of the pressures, I mean, come on, how much are they getting out of that? How much are they getting out of all of that? And if you think about all the challenges we've had in the last 18 months, I think all of us would be, you know, did those just come out of nowhere? Or have those been decades in the making? And so we're not going to solve these problems by continuing to do the things that we want to do and factory producing students. We need to slow down and get to know our kids. So that is my soapbox for just agency in the classroom. And you know, if kids feel heard, they're going to be heard and they're going to have voice.
Awesome.
Love it.
A good soapbox, by the way. All right. So let's turn to some questions. We had some great questions in the chat. I know I didn't get to them all. And so if anyone wants to throw one of those into the space, just turn your camera and video on and pop in and say hi and ask away.
Am I running the chat here? You
No.
guys, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
They're good.
We're on it.
They can
I
handle
can't facilitate and talk. I've already tried doing that. It was terrible.
Jump in, Jennifer. It's fine.
Yeah, well, and I'm in the kitchen. I'm kind of smack in the middle of preparing some stuff, but I love what you're working on and love the model. And as a product of a really similar sort of school myself, really impressed and pleased to hear that this is going on. So I had two questions that I had put in the chat. One of them you did start to address, but that's the question of the bridge between high school and university and how you're making sure that your students aren't disadvantaged when it comes to university entrance, more than preparation. I'm sure they're plenty prepared. But I know that when I was applying for college, there were two schools in the entire United States that would accept a kid without traditional grades and traditional transcripts. And then the second is around, and now I've lost my second one. Oh, it's around whether your kids are doing any policy work to change educational policy in your region right now, since you guys are doing so much great groundwork right there.
Yeah, cool. Well, you know, unfortunately, the kids aren't as excited about educational policy as maybe we are. They're a lot more concerned about climate policy, and they're really actively engaged in the climate strikes that we have here in town and the social justice movement. Educational policy, not so much. I'm sure our kids have been involved somewhere with that. You know, Boise, Idaho's a very conservative state. Tough legislature to work with. I don't think they want to hear from kids. But, you know, with that being said, we have definitely taken the kids to go, you know, advocate for competency-based education and whatnot. A lot of our advocacy work is just getting student panels working with different leaders and whatnot, and sharing what this could look like. As far as positioning our students for school, we've got a fantastic college counselor. We've done a tremendous amount of work in communicating with schools, so they understand what we're up to and what it looks like. The first year was probably the most difficult in convincing them to take our students, because we don't produce grades. There are no A's, B's, no GPA. They get this growth transcript that really has a progression of emerging all the way to advancing and mastering. But communication and development of a very powerful school profile has been our number one thing. Our college counselor reaches out to every school whenever our students apply. It is to the point we've got numbers of schools we don't need to do that with anymore. New schools on the radar, we reach out. We invite schools into the over to One Stone, and in the spring and the fall when they're doing their rounds, and just communicate. And once our students are out on campus, we've found colleges are like, we want those kids. And so they start advocating, saying, bring your kids. We're like, well, let's make a pipeline between One Stone and our school. We've been accepted by, our students have been accepted by 115 different schools across the nation. And that's small, private, liberal arts schools to large state schools, design schools, engineering schools. It's been pretty impressive. And there are some schools that, aren't ready for it. But we do what we can. And so 100% of our students are accepted into college before they graduate from One Stone. Doesn't mean they're all going. We've got 87% of our students go on to college. 13% will either do a gap year / go into career. But 100% of our students have opened those doors, because we know, like, once they graduate, it's a lot harder. If they decide not to do college in their first year, it's a lot harder to get them back. And so we tell them all, we're opening that door. You can walk through it if you want.
All right, thanks, Jennifer. Other questions? I know Dean had a great question that, the video opened the door to a little bit. So if Dean, you're out there and hearing us, I'd love for you to pose it into the space. Give him a second. I think his question from earlier was that.
Sorry.
There you go, jump in.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I was just running around trying to multitask here. No, I was curious to know what, I mean, and I recognize Idaho is like similar to where I live. It's pretty white, and just wondering what first of all, if you do see this potentially working in more diverse communities, and if you do try and seek some sort of diversity, and that doesn't just necessarily mean by race. I guess diversity comes in a lot of different forms, but just wondering what your kind of philosophy is on that and how you may or may not be addressing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, diversity looks different here in Idaho, particularly in Boise. We've got I think more diversity around socioeconomic indicators, also the way in which students identify. But as far as the model going beyond our area, I absolutely believe, and we're actually working on developing partnerships with other organizations and other schools to scale the growth transcript and the bold learning objectives. Together, we call them the growth framework, and it's a whole school model. We didn't really get in the business to be a model provider, but we are looking at that space because we know that there's need. And we're also looking at smaller parts of our program that are more scalable. I don't think a lot of, at least schools that are like in operation now aren't going to throw away their learning model and take on everything we do overnight. We might be able to develop small parts like our Living in Beta program, or we've got, other aspects of what we do, getting Project Good into the schools or whatnot, or even into communities. So we are working on that. And, I absolutely do think that, it's incredibly transferable across communities. If you're leading with voice, you're leading with humanizing learning and empathy and relationships, I think it could work in any community. I think it needs to be very community driven. And so it wouldn't be us coming in saying, here's how you do it. It would be us working with a partner school or organization, and finding out what their needs are and helping them respond to those needs. So yeah, great question, because we've asked that ourselves, and that's kind of the work that actually I'm involved with. I was the director of school for a bit. I'm now moving into the space of research and design and working on scaling the model. So yeah, it's exciting work. It's also really challenging, especially in COVID.
Thanks, Chad. We had a question from Erica about the nonprofit part of the work. Is that part of the academic day, or is that still an after-school project? How has that matured?
Yeah, as far as the nonprofit work for like the experiential service and things like that, or
yeah, I'm assuming you correct me if I'm wrong, Erica. I think that's where she was going.
Yep, that's what I.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So the nonprofit work is going just as strong as ever. We continue to work with students. We've got students from 14 or 15 different high schools in the Treasure Valley. Students will come in, usually embark upon the building around 3:30 or 4, depending on their school schedule and what they have with after school sports and stuff, and engage in these projects that they've been working on since, same kind of approach since 2008, where students are really identifying things that they're interested in, passionate about, or things that break their heart. A lot of times we get, students taking on homelessness and poverty, to food insecurity, mental health. We've got a large refugee community here in Boise dealing with, refugee integration, and even, childhood, young learner literacy, et cetera. And so those students still come in. That nonprofit work is still happening. The lab school students are also part of that. And so, it's just magnified. It's just gotten bigger. During the school day, our lab students are working on design thinking, design lab, and that's where they're using the design thinking process to address kind of needs or problems in the community. And so while that's not necessarily experiential service, it is very similar work. So we're also engaged in that realm as well. So it's going well. It's going very well. We also have our student-led Design Studio, which is actually a revenue generator for the school. It's pretty cool. And Hatch, our kind of business incubator for student ideas, which are also both doing well.
Who else wants to jump in? I saw Holly had a question in chat. Rich had a comment in chat. We've got time for one more. Someone take it. Don't be shy, team. I'm putting a link over in the chat to the growth transcript, a deep dive into the growth transcript. Holly's question was, any alignment future to mastery transcript? Any discussion around mastery transcript?
With the MTC?
Yeah, with MTC and this growth transcript model, which is feeling pretty developed at this point.
Yeah, yeah, we've spoken with them, and we love what they're doing, and they love what we're doing. I'll leave it at that for now. I appreciate asking the most challenging question at the end. Yes, we're very aware of their work, and we love the idea that they're rethinking the transcript, and they love the idea that we're really rethinking like what can go into the transcript. And you know, I think there's a lot of room there for discussion.
So Chad, what's next with regards to student agency and voice? What other initiatives are you all hatching up? You have so many awesome proof points that you've had from last year. What are you doing next?
I don't know. We're doing a lot right now. We're really making this big push to scale Living in Beta, to scale the growth transcript, get it out there in the world. Students are a part of it. They you know, they jump on these calls, they jump on pitches that we do, they'll jump in panels. You know, they love getting involved. We're trying to figure out how to sustain a tuition-free independent school. You know, and students are a big part of that. And we've got a number of kind of ideas on how we're working with that. And so that's kind of where my work is right now. And a lot of the students who are more kind of strategically focused, get involved. You know, but it's complex. We've got the school recording studios, kids studio there, and the kids, you know, have their idea on where they want to take the Ripple studio. And we're like, you know, a bag of marbles just on the ground, just 101 different directions, just depends on who it is. So, you know, I think our big next step is just kind of to answer that question that I, you know, approached earlier, is like, what would this look like in other communities? And so we're working on that. And it's been very enlightening so far, and we're excited to continue that work. And if for those of you that want to talk more, I love talking. So you can always reach out. My email's chat@onestone.org. I'm also on the website. You can reach out anytime. If you want to learn more about our wayfinding mentorship program, please do reach out, and I can let you know all about it. We're doing another kind of session starting in early February. You know, so we've got a lot of stuff going on. Just reach out.
And hopefully if they're ever in Boise, they can stop in and get totally wowed for themselves.
You are always welcome to stop by if you're in Boise, Idaho, or if you want to come out. We're having a number of schools visiting, which has been really cool. You know, school leadership, you know, superintendents and district level folks, as well as principals and teachers and things like that. Just trying to figure out, like, what would this look like and how can we do this?
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. And, you know, Jason, now that you're closer, actually, now that you work at the school that my daughter attends, I'll come visit you, but if you ever, you know, just hop on that 45-minute play.
I would love to. We can keep talking.
Sounds great.
Okay, thanks everyone for joining, and thanks Chad for sharing tonight on Deeper Learning Details, session number 3. So for us in the What School Could Be Academy, next week, we're back into Academy Day 2. And so we have a deeper dive Academy Day. So no Deeper Learning Details deep dive next week. We'll follow up the following week. I just learned from Susanna, we might have a scheduling conflict on that one. So I don't want to commit to a time, but up next is a deep dive into gateways as a performance assessment tool from Francis Barter Charter Essential School in Devens, Massachusetts. And so that is what is up next on the agenda for us after we do What School Could Be Academy Day 2. So that is coming ahead. Thank you all for joining tonight. Thank you, Chad, for doing amazing, amazing work.
Yes.
And like in 3 years, this whole story is going to change. So we'll do it again.
Well, it was
Thank
a
you so
pleasure.
much.
Thanks to everybody for your interest and your time.
Right.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks
Good night.
again.
Good night, you guys.